This week in platformer mode, SuperLobster hosted his first ever speedrunning tournament. Participants ranged anywhere from top players such as Aibyou and Shroomy, to level designers such as KingEggPlant and TheArmyAnts. However, as speedrunning from a pool of 130 random levels specializes on quick decision making and the ability to route levels, it was anybody's tournament to win. Nobody exemplifies that better than the Geico Gecko, who's not even top 200 on platformer rank. Starting out round 1, he'd immediately lose his best of 3 match against MacLoris. However, as this is a double elimination tournament, he'd have a second life in losers bracket, and he'd go on a tear. He'd start off his next best of 3 sets with a win over Helloman GD, a Game 3 victory over former top 50 player Azurian, and pull off a Game 3 upset against Retro Trash. However, his next opponent, TheArmyAnts, was also one of the best moon grinders. Yet again, Geico Gecko pushed the set to Game 3 on Dans le Désert 2. TheArmyAnts was off to a rather rough start as he'd choke at the end of each room, giving Geico a sizable lead. Later on, TheArmyAnts was only moments away from clutching it up, because as it turns out, Gecko accidentally went the coin route in the last room. But then disaster struck as TheArmyAnts, confused, started to follow Geico Gecko before realizing the glowing object in the middle of the room was the exit, and this was the one split-second decision that allowed Gecko to move on to his next match against Aibyou. Yet again, no one expected Gecko to push Aibyou, who was a replacement for TNTKing, to Game 3. But it happened, and their final match, on 2 at all, came down to the wire in the last checkpoint. There was a boat that would accelerate as it passed through various speed-up rings. Since Geico had reached this checkpoint first and only took 2 attempts while Aibyou wasn't adapting to the speed-up rings as quickly, Geico moved on to their next match against former top 1 coin maxer, Ekisacik. Eki, who was frankly underseeded, would have a different pass-through bracket, as he'd beat former top 25 player Ecstatica, how to platformer level author TheArmyAnts before losing 1-2 to KingEggPlant, as he lost on Eggplant's own level gridlock machine, and then got screwed over by invisible hitboxes in redness. He would then have to go against SuperLobster, and their first match was on Floor Elysium. Lobster would start the level straight away, while Eki would use the strategy of heading to the settings menu to activate speedrun mode, which turns off the pause between screen transitions. However, this only paid off once he caught up in the last 10 UFO rooms. From there on out, they were constantly back and forth until they both reached the final room, and it all depended on who passed the dash orb first. And with Lobster's win, Eki was now on the back foot. Eki then won Game 2 on a random 5 moon, and would make quick work of Lobster on a quality dash orb level. And now it was Eki versus Geico Gecko. Eki would take on an early lead with a win on Locomotive. If Gecko wanted to stay in the tournament, he'd have to beat Eki on Aethos, a hard demon focused on bounce pads, momentum physics, and wall jumps. It was looking like Gecko's Cinderella run was coming to an end as Eki was multiple rooms ahead. However, on room 13, Eki would fail to spot this ceiling bounce pad for over 5 minutes, allowing Geico to catch up at the first dropper checkpoint. And no one knew who was going to win, as both of them cleared the hardest checkpoint on the very same attempt. Eki would be the first to reach room 15, which was primarily centered around wall jump, while Geico would not yet gain another lease on life, and was eliminated at 4th place. Eki would then play in a rematch against KingEggPlant. Game 1 went to Eggplant as they straight flyed better past these black orbs and burnt it down. However, on dashing over it, Eki had the chance to tie up the score before slipping off this platform, meaning Eggplant moved on to Grand Finals. And this match would be tough for KingEggPlant as he'd have to face off against Shroomy. What then ensued was an absolute bloodbath where Shroomy was in the lead on both the Great White Moon and Spider Tech. In fact, Shroomy won this entire tournament, losing only 1 game, round 1, to Azurian on jet lag. Feel free to join the next test tournament at the end of November by joining our Discord server, and you could go on a run like Geico. Some notable new hardest of the week are Nen on Glungus, Fubo on the slope boosting extreme Exaltation, Real1243 becoming the first mobile victor on Knoll after 35,000 attempts, and both Dashing and Artemka completing the current top 1 delightful climb less than 24 hours apart from each other.
Oh my god! Yes!
You actually did it.
Oh my god!
In other news, Mikoshi verifies Sedulous, a needle-styled level where you start off with a double jump. You might think this is easier than it looks, but it's actually not, because whenever a spike is at the end of a platform, that end also has an extra invisible corner hitbox. Once you reach the fake checkpoint, the level grants you infinite jumps. However, Miikoshi had to rush all the way back to the start before rising lava incinerated them alive. After doing so, they climbed up and down this relatively straightforward cube tower before completing the level. Congratulations to Miikoshi on verifying a level that's presumably top 5 and beating Convolution shortly after. Some other notable completions of this week are Voplat on the Blooming Garden and Mr. Prizrak on Void World Deathless. For those looking for something easier to play, check out Tick Tick Boom by GHH8, KingEggPlant, and Yesavoy. It features this custom orb where after clicking it, you're suspended in midair. You can then instantly move left, right, or up 2 separate times. On the 3rd click, you'll be propelled the direction of your choosing and subject to the laws of gravity once again. After scaling the mountain for a while, you'll encounter these red blocks that deactivate for a short time, which in turn forces the player to get more comfortable with the custom orb mechanic. This then allows the sky section to add gravity portals, various bounce pads, and teleport portals without overwhelming the player. After reaching the mountain caves, you'll lure the Firebird boss into several explosions. However, this explosion then causes an avalanche, and you'll have to outrun it before being buried alive, serving as a final test on how well you've adapted to the level's gimmick. Tanuklen becomes the second ever victor of Ruined, a top 5 with a ton of invisible hitboxes. This jump near the start of the level literally turns into a frame perfect due to them. Later on, you'll have to hit this upside down pink pad without bonking on the larger ceiling tile. However, the two hardest parts of the level are right back to back, at the ending. Starting out, you'll need to B-hop, which is when you buffer your next jump to gain extra height while squeezing through or strafing pixel perfectly around the side of these spikes. Right after, there's essentially a blind drop, where after falling between these spikes, you dodge more invisible hitboxes and aim for the corner of this blue portal before landing safely. Also be sure to check out Drop Near, and Getting Over at Hard Daemon where you use a spear to climb up a mountain. Thank you all for watching, and subscribe so we can hit 2K before 2026.